Today we'll be discussing the prodigal son, the lost son, and Keith, I'm glad you brought up this great idea to go into it, right? Because we all went into the world and rejected God after He's blessed us with so much, and the whole process of the journey, and then coming back to God, and the love He has and how he still blesses us after how we've rejected him. And I'd love to get this going, this ball rolling, with you starting, if you want to lead the way.
For sure. Um, so over the past few days, I've been looking at this interesting parable, and most of us know the story, how it is, but there were a few things that I had not noticed before. So if we start at the beginning of Luke chapter 15, we have an interesting setup. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" Okay, so you have three groups of people gather around Jesus at this time. And it appears to be they're gathering at a person's home and they're celebrating some kind of feast. So you have three kinds of people. You have the tax collectors, you have the so-called sinners, and then you have the Pharisees. And Jesus gives these three different parables that which we're familiar with. The parable of looks like the lost coin, the lost sheep first, then the lost coin, and then finally the parable of the lost son. So it dawned on me that these parables, and by the way, the parables continue in the next chapter, right? And it gives other parables as well, about the one that culminates with the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. So all of these parables are tied together, but somehow, like when we do studies, we kind of like isolate them, in certain things, so we don't make the connections that how they're related to each other. So the parable of the lost son is nested is in the middle of these two messages that Jesus has. So the first three parables that we see are aimed at these three groups individually, but notice that the ones who are closest to Jesus, right, are are the ones who are listening, but the Pharisees are standing off, but they are also listening, but they're like not close to listening to what Christ says. They're just disgusted by the presence of these sinners because they're too holy to be among them. Okay, so now with that in mind, we're going to look at this parable of the lost son. You got to know the story already. The younger son asked the father to divide the inheritance with them while the father is still alive. If you know anything about Middle Eastern culture, this is not just an offense to the father. This is actually a death wish to the father for just the mere asking of this, of dividing the inheritance. So that was as outrageous as that request was. You know what was more outrageous than the request was the answer. Actually, the father actually granted the answer. You know, if this happened in any other home in the Middle East, that son would have gotten, beaten up or something. Not only not get the reward he asked, he would have gotten, a big time, beat.
Would he
Okay.
have been stoned?
I'm sorry.
Would that be cause to have their child stoned?
Probably not stone,
Like
but beat.
disrespecting your parents? Like, is that a bit
Disrespect.
of disrespect that you could be stoned for
I
that?
don't I don't know if the father would have stolen them, but he certainly would have given them, something to think about, for the next few days.
Uh,
Anyway, at the very least. Okay. Regardless. So that's why the outrageous answer, that like more than the request, is even more outrageous is the answer. Okay. So we know the story. Oh, by the way, when the father when he says he divides the inheritance with them, you need to realize that the son got a third and his older brother got 2/3 of it. Because according to Deuteronomy, the older son is the firstborn. He gets twice the inheritance. So whatever the inheritance is, the firstborn gets twice the amount of what the rest of the children get. And that's found in Deuteronomy 22, I think, verse 17, somewhere there. But it's in the law of Moses. So the older son, if they were following the law, would have gotten twice the amount of money that the younger son did. Okay? So we know the story. He goes out there, he wastes all his money. He begins to come in need, and then when he comes to his senses, quote unquote, right? He tells to himself, "I'm going to my father and become a servant because I'm no longer worthy to be, his child. So maybe my father will take me." And when he was on his way, we know the story again. When he was way off, far way off, the father saw him, and as the son began to give his premeditated speech, the father interrupts him and basically throws the royal robe on him and gives him the sign-in ring, which basically means he has basically the family credit card, like everything that he has at his disposal. And not only that, he brings him home and throws a big fat party for him. Now you would think that the older brother, right, would be a little bit happy or something, right? He got twice the inheritance. This is another that's not in the parable, but he should have been happy, I would think. He got twice as much money as the younger son. Okay, so the story says that the older brother was not happy, and here's the reason why he's not happy. He's not happy because the father throws a party for a son that was rebellious and kind of left him away while he was with the father all along, and the father never even once even killed a small calf for him. That was his complaint. Okay. Now, I will ask a question. Who does the younger son represent, and who does the older son represent?
So from my understanding, the older son is symbolic of, to me, it seems like someone who's been loyal to the faith and the church their whole life, and has been doing good works, and by all accounts is going to make it home to heaven. And the prodigal son is the rebellion, similar to the other parable of the people that come at the 11th hour get the same pay as someone that was there the whole day. It's like that same concept. Like I've been dedicated my whole life, and my brother's rebellious and goes off in parties, and he gets celebrated. I think that's who the older brother is to me. And then the rebellious one, the sinner, the one that doesn't the younger one just is symbolic to me of rebellion and sin and turning from God. But both of them needed their father.
When I was reading The Prodigal Son, I was a big thing that really stuck out to me is when right here in verses 15 and 16 of Luke 15. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain or desire to have filled his belly with husks or pods that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And at first I was thinking in the lines of really trying to be there and understand why would he work for nothing? Why would he work for nothing? That doesn't make sense. And then it came to my mind, I'm like, okay, Zach, you need to take a step back and remember this is a parable. You need to look at it spiritually, and then it will make sense. And so I took a step back and looked at it, and I was like, wow, here this is that in the world there's a famine. There's a spiritual famine, right? And this rebellious child of God that goes out into the world goes and does all these things for nothing. It's a complete waste of time. It's a waste of resources, and you get nothing out of it ultimately, right? And it leads to your destruction. And then I was thinking about how the upper echelons of society, these Luciferians and whatnot, those that have all this knowledge, all this spiritual truth, right? Truth. They have all this goods for themselves, and then they give us the scraps to the goyim, the catechumen. They give us the scraps, and they feed it to the swine. And so here's this child of God who finally wakes up in his distress and realizes there's nothing for me here except garbage, you know. And that's all there is. Maybe if I humble myself and go back to the true living God, I I could be a servant and at least survive, you know. And then, he goes back and God gives him everything. He gives him, and you go all the way to verse 22 of Luke 15. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe. And so we see here again, let's look with spiritual eyes, the best robe. We are covered with Christ's righteousness. That means we put on his righteousness. We have a healed heart and we do what's right. We live in harmony with God's law of love. And put it on him and put a ring on his hand. This is a ring of authority. So we have the authority to preach truth. What truth? The truth about God's character of love. We have that authority. Christ said, I have been given authority. What was that authority? To reveal the Father's character of love. The next thing right here, and shoes on his feet. Well, if you look at the full armor of God that Paul brings up, what is it that we put on? The shoes of the gospel. So we live out our life revealing the character of God, the good news, the true eternal gospel. So the true eternal good news that God is a God of love, that God is good. So I just find it very interesting, and that we really need to look at these parables with spiritual eyes and look at it that God sees things completely different than and how we see things. And so it ultimately comes down to we need to humble ourselves and come to God. If we humble ourselves and come to God, he will truly bless us with great things and great truths. And I mean, and it talks about how to bring the fatted calf and kill and let us eat and be merry. I was thinking about that as well. I was like, what's the fatted calf? And in this case, I could be wrong, but to me, it seems like it's the perfect life and sacrifice of Christ to provide us eternal salvation, and we partake in that. And it's savory, it's good, it fills us, and be merry, Anyways, I just wanted to leave off with that it's just such a beautiful thing, that in this world, there's nothing for us. There's only destruction, and we only get the scraps from the father of lies, the devil. But if we go to God with a humble heart, we get everything. Eternal life, the privilege to share truth so others can be blessed and be happy and have peace. And that's just a very beautiful thing. Yeah.
One
Amen.
little thing I want to add on yours, Zach, is the beautiful breakdown, by the way. But the truth is really secret knowledge, which is a package of lies. No truth. No truth.
Exactly.
All lies. Secret knowledge. Our secret knowledge.
Yep.